Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, New Hampshire State Senator Andy Sanborn. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. Everyone, good afternoon. How are you? First and foremost, obviously, we have to thank Isaac and Caleb for all the great work they've done to try to put this event together. It really is awesome. And having put events together myself, it's a lot of work. Don't let their ease of conversation and general demeanor not tell you it's incredible. It's an incredible amount of work. But for those of you who don't know me, I am State Senator Andy Sanborn. I'm a fourth-generation New Hampshire native. That my family immigrated to this great state in the 1840s during the Great Potato Famine. Are there any Irish in the room? If you are, you'll recognize the fact that we had a little problem over in Ireland which forced us all to immigrate. And I'll come back and talk about that issue in a couple of moments. Now, my family settled up in Lebanon, New Hampshire. My grandfather dropped out of school in the 5th grade to go work sawmills in order to feed his family. After watching his older brother, 1 year older, take a kickback from a stick that killed him, he lost most of his fingers working in that sawmill. In the middle of the Depression, he stood in line with 200 other people just begging for a job. And he got that job, and was carrying coal down the street in buckets. He ended up working for that company for 20 years, and then had the opportunity and actually bought that company and owned it for 45 additional years. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my America. That's my America, that you can be anything on earth that you want to be, if you have a good moral code and a good ethical code, and you work hard and just try to do the right thing. My grandfather was illiterate and had 60 employees and worked every single day to the day of his death as the happiest warrior I'd ever met, and was an incredible inspiration to me and my family. And as a result of that, I'm the first person in my family to ever graduate college. I followed in my grandfather's footsteps and my father's footsteps and became a small business owner. Living that same life of just believing if you always did the right thing, just do the right thing. Have that good moral code, have that good ethical code, treat people politely, that things will all work out for you. I also must say for the record that just after I graduated college, I met the truly, and I say it very honestly and on a regular basis, some of my friends will know, that I am a man who is helplessly in love with his wife. And she is my soul and she is my universe. And she's always been with me on this journey. And she today, because we are so close, actually represent together in the legislature. She's in the House and I am in the Senate. And it's Representative Lori Sanborn who's hiding out back because she typically runs. She runs when I speak. And so people say to me on a regular basis, this is the second time in the history of our state where we have a husband and wife who are in the legislature together. And they always say, what's it like? And I say, it's like in my house, just like it's in your house. Every single morning I wake up, I lean over, I give my wife a kiss and tell her how helplessly I love her. And she tells me how to vote. So look, I'm very honest about it. I never wanted to be in the political arena. I never wanted to be a politician. I never had any aspirations to be one. I was just a small business owner that after starting, owning, and running several other businesses, because I'm one of those guys they call a serial entrepreneur. I like business. I like being a business owner and investor. I entered into an industry that was a government-regulated industry. And for the first time in my life, I saw the heavy hand of government and all of its power and all of its restriction come down on top of me and my family at a level I had never seen before. Until that point, I had no appreciation for how bad the relationship between people and government had become. So as a result of a long, challenging experience, about 6 months long with my government, I made that decision, as others have done, to take my turn in the political sphere and try and bring a little bit of my background, and my background's in banking and finance, into the conversation. And as a result, I'm now a 4-term state senator, and I have a reputation of being a straight-talking, no BS, hard-charging guy that believes in the Constitution, God, and the fact that we should have more powers in our government. To me, it's not that high of a bar. Or at least I didn't think that it would be when I first ran. But I also have to point out that in the room today, you've got Representative Kurt Welper, Ray Hayward, Norm Sibler, Scott Wallace, and Dan Easy, who will be speaking after me, who along with Representative Sanborn represent everything that is right about representing you. You know, with 424 members of the New Hampshire legislature, there's the really good, there's the really bad, and there's the indifferent. And in this case, quite frankly, you have the really good. You've got people who, like me, truly believe that they're your employee, that they made a decision to become politically active because they actually want to work for you, which is a very rare thing that we see in politics today, of finding people that have your back, that fight for you. And these representatives actually do that. I can attest to that. Now, granted, there's always some general conflict between the upper chamber and the people's house, as we tend to call the Senate and the House. But all that kidding aside, these individuals actually fight for you every single day, and you should be very, very proud and thankful for that. So, as I'd said before, I've always likened myself as a very reluctant politician. I never ran because I wanted to be like all the other politicians. I ran because I was mad at all the other politicians, that I didn't think that they were listening to us anymore. I didn't think that they were respecting us. I didn't believe that they shared our conservative values. And I truly didn't believe that any one of them had ever read the Constitution or abided by what it meant. So for me, over the past 4 years, it's been an amazing experience. It's been fun. And I've been, frankly, in that place where every 2 years people have said, hey, look, you know, you seem to have something for this industry. You're very committed. You're someone that actually says what he means and means what he says. Would you consider running for higher office? And every 2 years I've said no, because, again, if they were doing a great job, I wouldn't be here. And I share that position with my conservative House reps that are here. If the moderates were doing a great job, we wouldn't have to show up. But at this point, I see an opportunity for us. I see an opportunity that, amazingly, we have no representation in Washington, D.C. today. None. When you consider the fact that with the New Hampshire Senate is a Republican-controlled Senate, the New Hampshire House and the corner office are controlled by Republicans, all we have today are 4 people that spend all of their days criticizing the Republican Congress in Washington, criticizing the Republican Senate in Washington, criticizing the Republican president. And I don't believe that bodes well for our state. I don't believe that today, when Washington, D.C. is discussing what it needs to do to help, or in my case, maybe just to get out of the way, that the 4 people we have who spend all of their days criticizing us and our people is good representation. So I've made that decision that I'm going to run for Congress, and I announced about 2 weeks ago. And my wife would yell at me if I didn't say it, but if we have a little splash page called andysanborn.com, because clearly I'm an Irishman, and we're about half as smart as we look, and we mostly look like idiots. So it's very simple. It's myname.com. I invite you to come on and check us out and help participate. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. But the other thing that Isaac and Caleb asked me to talk about was to talk a little bit for a couple minutes about the Constitution. And I'm actually going to take a slightly different approach to it, but I think it's something that most of you, if not all of you in this room, would agree with. As much as we talk about wanting amendments, as much as I don't just believe in our need for a balanced budget amendment. As a legislator, I put one in only to see that not my conservative friends who would vote for it, but my less conservative friends voted to kill my balanced budget amendment. I put it in 3 times. I'm the guy that puts in tax cuts. I'm the guy that cuts regulation. I'm very proud to do that. But in some instances, we do have to recognize that we need an Article 5 convention, because sometimes amendments actually don't do what we thought they would do, and we need to come back and readdress them. Now, in this case, the story I'm going to talk to you about has less to do with the U.S. Constitution, because quite frankly, at the time, Our founding fathers, or at that point, our elected fathers in Washington, felt it was a bad idea, but the state of New Hampshire and 37 other states actually thought it was a good idea. So some of you might remember a little bit of your traditional history back in the mid-1800s. Remember how I told you my family immigrated to America in the 1840s. 1846 we came here with nothing. But like so many other people, 860,000 Irish left Ireland to immigrate to America because if they didn't, they were going to die because there was no food. And as you may know, if there's any Irish in the room, that we tend to be Catholics. And in fact, for the record, I kind of joke the fact that I'm the only Irish Catholic Jew practicing Christian that's running for Congress because my mother's actually Jewish, which is another story we'll talk about on my next visit. Ireland, frankly, has still never recovered from the mass migration out in the 1800s. We had a lot of Irish Catholic come to America. We were not recognized as a class of people that America wanted here. We were barred from going into the stores. We were barred from owning real estate. We were barred from actually getting jobs. But the most important part was those that were in power in our government wanted to bar us from having an education. Because they felt if the Irish got an education, that they would somehow compete for the rest of America for the power and influence that at that point only the Protestants had. Because our government was mostly run by Protestants at that point. So there was a gentleman from Maine who had a long established career in politics, and for the record, I believe in term limits, and I've signed the pledge doing so, because I believe all of them should have term limits. But this gentleman made a decision that he wanted to come up and make sure that they preserve the power in Washington, D.C., and they wanted to make sure that the Catholics and the Irish and the Christians should never be able to get enough of an education to compete against other people. So his name was James G. Blaine. So Mr. Blaine came forth with an amendment to the Constitution. And that amendment to the Constitution would specifically prohibit any government money from being used to support education. And what sounds like a great separations of powers conversation, and presented so, actually turned into a way to ensure that the Catholics were never able to have money to create schools like the Protestants had. Now, amazingly, this amendment, like I said, never passed the U.S. Constitution. So they went on a road show. They went to all 50 states. Back then there weren't 50 states, but they went to all the states and got each state to implement it. New Hampshire is one of 38 states today in America that specifically has an amendment baked into Article 83 of our state constitution, because I do believe respectfully that we need to look at state constitutions as much as we look at the federal constitution. So we have an amendment today that is discriminatory against the Irish, against people of Christian faith, against everything I think most of us in this room probably believe in, even if you're not of Christian faith or Irish. Because we are a land of amazing opportunity. This, as Isaac said earlier in his speech, is the place you can be anything. You can achieve anything you want on earth in this country. That's what makes us who we are. But right now in New Hampshire, we specifically have a prohibition on giving parents the right to choose where their kid's going to be educated. A specific prohibition that even though our government's going to take your money to fund education, they're not going to provide you with the same opportunity to ensure that your child has the best educational opportunities they could possibly have. So this is something that's always bothered me based upon my background and my upbringing. And coincidentally, we're at an amazing place in New Hampshire today and in America today. You know, I joined a good friend of mine who's still one of my dearest friends, who I became a state senator with. His name was Jim Forsyth. And Jim actually championed through, when I was a co-sponsor of that legislation, the first ever kind of thread the needle way to create a scholarship fund to give parents a little bit of financial support based upon tax credits to businesses that donate. For the record, my wife and I donate to this fund, to make sure parents that might not see that perfect fit for that round kid in the square hole, that they can go get better opportunities, or if they choose that they want to homeschool their children, that they might have an ability to have some resources to do so. This brought up this conversation from our friends on the progressive left that said, you can't do that, because our version of separation of church and state is driven on education. So you can't have a program that helps poor families, because we all know that if your family has means and it's wealthy, it can send their kid anywhere they want. This is a program specifically for everyday people like me, stabs on their knees and dirt under their fingernails who actually work for a living. So we were able to pass it. I know all the legislators in the room that were in power at that point voted for it. Actually went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court found in our favor. And this, combined with 3 or 4 other states that have put in similar pieces of legislation, not just fighting to give parents their opportunity, give parents their right to help make the decisions of how to educate their kids, but to push back against this notion in 38 states that we should treat everybody the same. So today we're about to embark on a very exciting thing. Some of you may have heard of a good friend of mine named Grover Norquist, who runs a little think tank in Washington, D.C. called Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, like us, is a hardcore American who thinks our taxes are too high. And he goes around the country making legislators sign pledges that they will not raise taxes, and if they fall back on those pledges, not afraid to beat them up over it. So Grover and a bunch of other people have come together, and we've made this decision that we're actually going to take a frontal assault on the Blaine Amendment, which raises a great question of what are we doing about amendments today, and how do we address and how do we find fairness and opportunity for all? So this really is an exciting time for us, because in the 4 terms that I've been a state senator, my first term, there was never a lot of conversation about how do we take our country back. I was an early member of the Tea Party. I was all over the state of New Hampshire. I traveled actually all over the country speaking at events about our need to take back our country. But today we have Article 5 conventions and conversations. We're about to look at things like the Blaine Amendment to try and give families back their rights. We're actually fighting and talking every day about balancing the budget and getting our power back from the federal government. So it's a very, very exciting time for us. So let me close, because I know we're very short for time, and I promised Isaac I would not take any more than 10 minutes, and I think I'm at 12 because I'm getting the hook from the beautiful lady in the back of the room. If raising your children is important to you, if ensuring that parents have the ultimate right in order to direct how their children are raised, and they should have that ability to find the best educational place for their children and not submit to a government program that assigns education by zip code, then stay tuned, because we have some great things going that's really going to be a great exercise in how we actually take our Constitution back from the politicians. With that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time. Thank you.